Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Let's just get right into some more paranormal encounter stories from Reddit. Today we're going to be reading some more life after death related stories from Reddit. Our first question comes from Jixnu Kabaldar, and it says, "What's the most convincing evidence for consciousness continuing after death that you've come across?" Learning about Figs responds, "I've seen and read a lot of stories that are astounding, including reincarnation stories and NDEs. My evidence for you, though, is personal, and I hope a comfort. I also lost my beloved granny this year. I was very close to her, and was one of her primary caretakers in the few months she lived with pancreatic cancer. I was very angry at myself for missing her last few days, as I was studying for exams, and we had no idea she was going to deteriorate so fast. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already nonverbal, and I was alone with her when she passed away. It was horrible, and I was in deep shock. Then, on the first day of mourning, I started to hear her voice in my head. She kept saying things like, 'Hello, I'm right here,' and, 'Well, that's not right at all,' and all sorts of other things that would totally have been her response. It sounded so much like exactly what she would say, in her voice. I was almost laughing a bit. As difficult as the night before had been, I felt good. I didn't feel like she was gone. I was still really sad, but I just felt like she was right there with us. After 1 week, I had a dream. In it, she had a bag packed, a backpacker's bag, like she was going off on an adventure. I knew in the dream she was going somewhere else, but I also knew she was dead and wasn't coming back. I gave her a big hug and got to say the goodbye I missed. When I woke up, I didn't hear her voice anymore. I didn't feel her presence anymore. For a few weeks, it was like that. No one on the other end of the line. Now when I think of her, I feel peace and calm. I miss her a little bit, but I feel like she's watching over me. It's almost like, instead of her spirit being contained in a body as in life, it's everywhere. These are all the things people say about a loved one dying, but it's different when you actually feel it yourself. They are common sayings because they are common experiences. When so many people experience the same thing, even if science doesn't have an explanation for them, it is still proof that something is happening and we just don't understand yet." My other grandmother passed away a few years ago after a long period of deteriorating health and mental function. When I left for a long trip, I cried and cried because I knew it was probably the last time I would see her alive. When I said goodbye to her, she was crying. In a moment of lucidity, she understood what was happening. She gave me kisses on the hand and said the only words she knew how to say, "My son, my son." I'm a girl. This was just what she knew how to say still. A few months after I left, I had a very vivid dream with her. In it, she was younger, lively, and chatting. She was so happy to see me. When I woke up, I got a call from my mom that she had passed away. And Gransky responds, "I was a skeptic, but my partner passed away earlier this year. 3 days after her passing, she visited me in a dream that was the most vivid dream I've had in all my life. After the dream, I had what I can only describe as a warm blanket of energy that covered my body. I know it was her, and it sparked my spiritual awakening." Well, I definitely believe that our loved ones can visit us in our dreams. Scientists still don't really know exactly why or how we dream, so why couldn't it be visiting another astral plane to, talk to those on a different realm? Who knows? I'm no scientist. The next question from Alaska Stiletto asks, "Redditors who have died and come back to life, what did you see?" Ray says, "Overwhelming peace and happiness, a bright, airy, and floating feeling. I live a very stressful life. Imagine finding out the person you have had a crush on reveals that they have the same feelings for you, and then you win the lotto later that day. That was the feeling I had. I never feared death afterwards, and I'm relieved when I hear of people dying after suffering with an illness." Recreationally Used responds, "I actually expected to be horrified by these comments, but so many of them are like yours. It brings me a lot of peace about my mother's passing. I was 12, and she was only 38. She had pancreatic cancer, one of the most violent ones. It was an unexpected diagnosis for her age. By the end of it, she had a morphine pump in her chest and would drift to sleep sitting up in her wheelchair, so she needed to be strapped in. It's horrible how quickly it can eat you away." I wasn't there, but I'm told by everyone who was that she woke up from her sleep, looked up at my grandmother, smiled, and said, "I have to go." Then she was gone. The last thing my mom wanted to do was die because she wanted to be with me and my sisters more than anything. We were truly her world. Even if we don't meet again, all I could ever hope for is that she has that feeling forever. Her life was hard and short, but she deserved everything. Hannah LL7 says, "My sister died and said it was extremely peaceful. She said it was very loud, like a train station, and lots of talking, and she was stuck at this area that was like a curtain with lots of beautiful colors, colors that you don't see in real life, according to her. A man told her he was sorry, but she had to go back, as it wasn't her time." Hunto Carr says, "I had a really similar experience, except I was in an endless garden with flowers that were colors I've never seen before. It was quiet and peaceful, and a woman in a dress looked at me, shook her head, and just said, 'Not yet.' As I was coming back, it was extremely loud, like everyone in the world was trying to talk all at once. It was all very disorienting, but it changed my perspective on life." One Cupcake at a Time says, "Nursing in the ICU, we've had people try to die on us many times during the years, some successfully. One guy stood out to me. His heart stopped, we called a code, are working on him, and suddenly he comes to. We hadn't vented him yet, so he was able to talk, and he started screaming, 'Don't let them take me! Don't let them take me! They're coming!' He was scared and yelling. Then he yelled a little more as we tried to calm him down, and he screamed, 'No, no!' and gestured toward the end of the bed, and died again. We didn't get him back. It was seriously creepy. We called his son to tell him the news, and his son said basically, 'Good, he was an SOB.' Wild Individual 6520 says, "My grandmother was near death for months. All the hospice nurses and us, family, were amazed at how she was still mentally sharp and hanging on overall. But for all these months, she kept telling me how she was having these horrible dreams of people at the foot of her bed. She didn't see their faces, they were just figures. Sometimes they would grab at her and want to take her somewhere. Sometimes she would ask them questions, but they wouldn't answer. She became afraid of going to sleep, so I'd often stay with her so she could hold my hand if she got scared. All her hospice nurses said that seeing people or a patient talking about taking a trip was common, but usually these figures brought on a sense of peace. But my grandmother was genuinely terrified of the figures. I always wonder if she's okay." Fluffy Hotel 5184 says, "I was in a gray fog with a girl who looked a lot like a young version of my grandmother, who was still alive, but dressed like a pioneer in the 1800s. She didn't say anything, but kept pulling me towards an opening in the wall. I kept refusing to go because I was so tired. I finally got tired of her nagging and went, and that's when I came to. I had bled out during a C-section, and my heart could not beat without blood. They had to deliver the baby, sew up the bleeders, refill me with blood before they could restart my heart, so, at least 12 minutes gone." Nunya Bid says, "I have a near-death one. My grandmother in Mexico is old, and she was in the hospital getting treated for her dementia. We were with her, and she was not remembering anything. Then, out of nowhere, she looks at the door window and stares. She tells the door in Spanish, 'No, not me, not yet. Get the girl in the next room instead. I'm not going.' The next thing you know, there's a code in the next room, and the girl died sometime later. We didn't know who were in the rooms around us. We think she saw La Muerte, essentially the Grim Reaper in Mexican culture, and then she was back to her dementia self. Crazy." My Precious Corn Chip writes, "I posted this before, but I always like to chime in on these kind of threads. Does near death count? I had a blood pressure of 60/40 and a 104-degree fever and was out of consciousness for a solid 3 days in the critical care unit in 2005 after I contracted bacterial endocarditis as a result of low immunity and heart defect. I spent those days floating above my hospital bed, looking down at the room, my body, nurses checking on me, visitors. When I came to, days later, I could recount exactly who had been to visit me, who had stayed the night in the room with me, and conversations they had between each other while I was out. While I was floating, it was warm, and there was no pain, not even gravity to hold my limbs down. Although I knew that was my body below me with all the tubes and wires coming out of it, I was at peace with the situation. All of my anxieties were gone. There was no tunnel of light or dead family, just me attached to my physical body by a thin silver ethereal cord in a state of total bliss. Edit. Switched diastolic and systolic. I was around 60-40 when I lost consciousness before my near-death experience. Bob Author writes, I died for 7 minutes back in March. While I was in the hospital for shortness of breath, I had a bad lung hemorrhage. I lost so much blood that my heart had none to pump. I went into cardiac arrest and a code blue was issued. It took the doctors 7 minutes to get my heart started again. During that time, I had a stroke due to the lack of oxygen to my brain. I woke up intubated and only semi-conscious for 2 days, then fully regained consciousness and asked, what happened? It's hard to correlate inner time to what was happening outside, but I can make some sense of it. I saw a series of 3 oval ellipses, one at a time, just suspended in black space. The ellipses were all upright, as though they were suspended by a string, but they weren't, and they all had a thickness to them, like a ring. On the inner and outer surfaces of the first ellipses, I saw mountains, streams, forests, and clouds. They were beautiful at first, but then they began to sour as their colors took on a yellow tinge. It faded away and was replaced by a second ellipsis that was a hot ring of iron, so hot that pieces of iron were slowly crumbling from it. I could smell the iron as the ring slowly disintegrated as it cooled into blackness. A nurse later told me that this is what blood smells like. I now take it that this is when I was in cardiac arrest. Suddenly the scene brightened to reveal the third ellipse that was covered with the beautiful clouds that were light pink and blue, like from the most beautiful sunrise or sunset. That, I believe, is when my heart started beating again. When I regained consciousness, those 3 ellipses remained firmly fixed in my memory. When I was told days later about my cardiac arrest and stroke, it all began to make sense to me. I even think I know the source of those images. I'm an astronomer and had been studying Johannes Kepler's Astronomica Nova and trying to understand how Kepler figured out that the orbits of the planets are ellipses and not circles. It had been on my mind for weeks, and when I hemorrhaged, my dying brain latched onto that shape. The initial and final ellipses were adorned with what I value most, the beauty of our planet, the outdoors, and sky. The yellowing of the initial ellipses reflected my dying brain, and the second ellipse was my brain's interpretation of the smell of blood as I faded away. The third ellipse when I began breathing and returning to life. That's all I saw. No tunnel of light or happy deceased family members welcoming me. I think that dreaming, dying, reflects what happens to be most accessible in your mind during that time. Your mind tells you a story about it. I was never afraid during my ordeal. I was just a dispassionate observer. Amazingly, the only lasting effects of my 7 minutes of code blue is a slightly diminished capacity of my short-term memory. I learned something from all of this. I'm sure it was a horrific sight to anyone outside, covered with blood as doctors crowded around me trying to pull me back to life, but inside all was calm. No pain, no discomfort, no worries. Accidents and disease may be terribly painful, but dying is easy. I'm not scared of dying, not in the least. Afraid of what comes before? Sure, but nature makes dying easy. Mertrip says, I always get into these comments way too late, but I'll tell it regardless. I have sick sinus syndrome. That means my heart gets out of sync and stops beating. Then my body convulses and my heart starts again and it looks like a seizure. When I go to the hospital after, no test reveals what's actually happening. But then one Saturday, I felt dizzy again, and my girlfriend drove me to the hospital, and I flatlined on the hospital bed a couple more times, and they realized that my heart was stopping. Now I have a pacemaker. Now, what does it feel like when I was dead for a few minutes at a time? It was just black. I have no memory of it at all. In fact, it was very easy to do. I always say that dying is very easy, but coming back is very difficult. Because coming back is when all the blood rushes back to your brain, and it's like having 1,000 dreams at once. It's very overwhelming, and usually when I come back, I'm screaming because it's so terrifying. I don't recommend it, but being dead, easiest thing you can do. Positive Attempt 435 says, when I had my near-death experience, I had awful delusions and hallucinations. I can see why some people really believe they've seen hell. I see it as just my conscience breaking down toward the end and showing me my fears. I've never actually died, but I was basically dead on an operating table. It felt evil and full of fear. I wish I got those ones where it's peaceful and I see relatives. I was in a straight up fear the whole time, and I still can't place the timeline or what I actually saw. I don't know how long it lasted or when it began or stopped. From the before times writes, I was laying on the operating table. The beeping of the machine slowly faded away, and the room plunged into darkness. I could feel myself drifting away from my body, an eerie sensation of weightlessness enveloping me. Suddenly, I found myself in a realm of vibrant colors and swirling mists. There, I met a council of beings made entirely of light, each radiating a different hue. They communicated with me, not through words, but through pure thoughts and emotions. They showed me the history of the universe, from the birth of the stars to the formation of galaxies, in the blink of an eye. But the most astonishing part was when they presented me with a choice to return to my earthly life or to explore the mysteries of the cosmos. I was tempted by the unknown, but the thought of my family brought me back. With their guidance, I descended through a tunnel of swirling energy and woke up in the operating room, gasping for breath. I can't fully explain the overwhelming emotions I experienced during that journey, but I know that there's more to our existence than meets the eye. It's a story that still haunts me to this day, a glimpse into a world beyond our understanding. Camp Express says, appendicitis nearly got me 5 years ago. While they were scrambling for a team to do surgery, I suddenly found myself in my living room, quietly knitting. No more pain, no hospital noises, just my home. This was no dream version of my living room either. There was that weird stain on the wall I can't seem to get clean, and the threadbare arms of the couch, the smell of the candle on the coffee table. I could feel the yarn in my hands and my needles, and I managed to do a couple rounds before I looked over and saw my grandfather standing by the hearth. I was thrilled to see him since I hadn't in so long, but then I realized that he had been dead 2 years. I told him that I knew he was dead, and now I'm pretty sure I'm in trouble because I'm dead too, but I wasn't supposed to be. He just smiled and said, "It'll be okay, baby." And for some reason I said, "That's just the way it is," and then slammed back into my body in the hospital. And Tino's Doggy Daddy writes, when I was 15 and a half years old, I had a motorcycle permit and a small Honda that I rode daily. I was riding to high school on a back road and lost control and flew over 20 feet over the handlebars. While I was in the air, time stood still and my life flashed before my eyes, literally. My mind brought up these snapshots of my life, one after the other. I can't tell you how many, but each one was very clear and recognizable. For example, one of the snapshots was my mom standing behind me, pulling up my pants, dressing me, when I was 3 years old. Your life really does flash before your eyes. Forgot to add, ended up in the emergency room with a broken collarbone. Wow, just so many different experiences. Some of them were really scary, but mostly they sounded so peaceful. And, that really helps make me less afraid of dying or losing a loved one, knowing that the people that have actually died and came back say it's not scary at all. So, well, at least most of them. But it does make me wonder what causes the scary ones. I just want to make sure and live my life so that I want to have one of those peaceful experiences when it's my time to go. Those scary people at the foot of the bed do not seem like something I want to mess with. Have you ever had a near-death experience or any kind of life after death experience you'd like to share? Please let me know in the comments below. It's such an interesting topic. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit like and subscribe if you did. And if you've had any creepy paranormal encounters you'd like to share, please share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, stay safe out there and don't turn off the lights.